Okay.
Hello, I'm here today to give a process speech for my speech class, and so I wanted to talk about something that I feel is kind of a lost art in today's society. With the trend of fast food and bakeries that are all over the place, I feel like individuals in this society no longer cook anymore, and more specifically, no longer really bake. Um, as a mother of two, oftentimes I spend a lot of my time in the kitchen preparing meals and snacks for my kids, and if there's one thing they love, it's cookies. And so I'm here today to tell you how to make our favorite chocolate chip cookies. This recipe is the recipe that my mom always made when I was a little girl, and to this day, I can remember her being in the kitchen, and I can remember the sounds of hearing Mom in the kitchen cooking, and I can remember the warmth of the oven and the smell of the cookies baking in the oven, and I can remember that, there's nothing in the whole wide world that beats eating a fresh-baked, homemade chocolate chip cookie. This recipe is really, really easy, and all you have to do is follow a few simple steps. The first step is in a medium-sized bowl, you cream a half a cup of shortening or butter, and you have to soften it, which means you have to let your butter sit out until it gets soft, and a half a cup of sugar, a quarter cup of brown sugar, 1 egg, and a teaspoon of vanilla. Now, a lot of people don't know what it means to cream. In fact, I myself had to ask my mom specifically what that meant. And basically what that means is you just have to mix it all together, adding one ingredient at a time. Now, a lot of people like to use a mixer, but in this specific instance, I find the best thing that you can use is a wooden spoon because the ingredients are kind of dry. And if you're using a mixer, then your ingredients get all caught up on the beaters, and it's a never-ending battle to try to get all that stuff scraped off. So I like to use a wooden spoon when I'm mixing my ingredients together. I also like to use a glass bowl rather than a plastic bowl, and it's best if you chill it in the refrigerator for a while before you start mixing in your ingredients, because it keeps your ingredients from sticking to the side of the bowl and it makes it easier to mix. Now, this specific recipe calls for a tablespoon of vanilla, and I just want to take a brief minute to explain the difference between vanilla and vanilla extract. Not the specific difference, but vanilla extract, or imitation vanilla extract, is not as strong as pure vanilla extract. So if I'm using imitation vanilla extract, which I use a lot because it's cheaper, I have the tendency to double the dose. So if you're using real vanilla, use what the recipe calls for. If you're using imitation vanilla, double it, and your recipe will be a lot better. The next thing you have to do in this recipe is sift in the dry ingredients. 1 cup all-purpose flour, 3/4 teaspoon of salt, and a half a teaspoon of baking soda. And a lot of people don't know what it means to sift. And years ago, they used to have a little metal cup with a little handle on the side that you could squeeze like this. And what would happen was the dry ingredients would be pressed through a kind of grate. What this did was it aerated your dry ingredients to make your recipes fluffier. You don't actually have to sift your ingredients, but it does make your recipe a little bit fluffier and not quite so heavy, and you can eat more of them if they're lighter. So I like to sift my ingredients. There are also different types of flour. This recipe calls for all-purpose flour. There's bread flour and cake flour and wheat flour and all different kinds of flour, but this recipe calls for all-purpose flour. And it doesn't have any extra gluten in it because you don't need, your bread flour has extra gluten in it to help it rise and stuff, help the yeast rise, but you don't need that for this recipe. So be sure that if you're making this recipe, you buy the all-purpose flour rather than the cake flour. It also calls for baking soda. Now, a lot of people see baking powder and they think it's the same thing as baking soda, but it's not. Baking powder has cream of tartar in it, and it also has starch in it, which has a tendency to dry things out. So you want to make sure in this recipe that you use baking soda rather than baking powder. That way your cookies will be moist and not dried out. After you sift in all your ingredients, you need to mix it really, really well with that good old wooden spoon I was telling you about. And you can add in 1 whole 6-ounce bag of semi-sweet chocolate chips. And the recipe that my mom has always used called for like a half a cup of chopped nuts, but we never really put nuts in ours. I know some people that like to use a half a cup of coconut or whatever. If you like it, you can throw a half a cup of it in there and it'll really be really yummy, but you don't have to, it's optional. After you get it all mixed really, really good, you take a teaspoon, not a tablespoon. A lot of people get confused as to what a teaspoon and a tablespoon is. I know my husband got confused about that a lot. But usually in a set of silverware you have 2 spoons, a littler spoon and a bigger spoon. The bigger spoon is the tablespoon, the smaller spoon is the teaspoon. So get your littler spoon and you scoop out a teaspoonful and you drop it onto a greased cookie sheet, and it's just like spraying Pam on there. You can rub butter on it or a little bit of Crisco on it, just something that's going to keep your cookies from sticking to the cookie sheet. And you drop them on your cookie sheet about 2 inches apart and you place them in the oven. Now it's very important that your oven is preheated. This recipe calls to preheat your oven at 375 degrees. If your oven is preheated, once you get your cookies on your cookie sheet and you put them in, you only have to cook them for 10 to 12 minutes. Once your cookies are done, you can pull them out and set them on a rack to cool. They will be really, really hot, but if you wait about 10 minutes or so, they're going to still be really warm and really moist. And you can call your family in from doing whatever they're doing, and you all can enjoy a nice, fresh, homemade chocolate chip cookie that is sure to bring any family just a little bit closer together.